have Joe Young talking about his oyster farm and a few other things. Joe is a good friend and a neighbor and a former occupant of the house I live in, because I live in his grandfather's house, and has been raising oysters in the mill pond since 2014?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And when Joe came up with this plan to have an oyster farm, I thought it was a great idea since it's my backyard too. And it takes, what, 3 years to get
3 or 4.
Okay, I don't want to steal your whole program.
No, that's okay.
But after we were comparing notes the whole time, because I did a lot of time in the D.C. area, so
They grow quicker down.
Well, yeah, we won't go into why. What's in the Chesapeake Bay. But anyway, I was a huge oyster fan, and I had my own personal collection of oyster knives. And so when Joe's first little crop of oysters came out, we talked about it a lot, and sort of, how big are they when they have to be harvested? And my big issue was, don't let them get too big. Nobody wants a huge mouthful of a raw oyster. So it's like, well, like this big? No, like this big. Mm-hmm. And much to my amazement, Joe had never eaten a raw oyster before. He's going to grow these things in the mill pond. So he shows up at my house one night with a bucket of one of his first crops, I guess, and says, now what do we do? So I whipped up my handy-dandy oyster knife and made him open the first one. And the very best part,
you opened the first one.
I know. I had to show him how to open them. So you stick it in the little noogie there, and you turn it, and boop, it up to. And first thing was that oyster opened beautifully. It was like, oh, this is so gorgeous. It wasn't this big, by the way. He followed the rules. Yeah. But the very best part, and I so wish I had a video of this. He's standing there looking at this thing. Well, first of all, I ate one and went, oh my God, these are so good. And then opened another one.
You missed something there, Jennifer. Jennifer's holding this oyster, and I had never seen an oyster before.
That's true.
Inside
Which, of course, I didn't realize since he's growing the things.
And she's looking at it, she's opened it, and I said, you put that in your mouth? I couldn't believe it.
That was my next line. Right? Yeah, because when we got to one number 2, I handed it to you, and you said, and you want me to eat this thing? And I said, yep.
And I did.
And he did. He slurped it down,
yep. And
then got this. That's the part I wish I'd had the video of, because you got this wonderful look on your face. It was like, that's not bad. That's pretty good.
It was the best
and
oyster.
And the rest is history, right? Yeah.
Best oyster I'd ever eaten.
Best High praise indeed.
I was amazed.
Anyway, that's my introduction to Joe Young. Welcome, Joe. Thank you for doing this.
So, looks like a friendly crowd, so I may have to read this because I forget things, even though it's my life. Anyway, and I get distracted very badly. So I'm Joe Young, for those that don't know me, and I think most of you probably have run across me here or there. And tonight I'm going to, probably a couple little bombshells I've got to drop here, that a lot of people think that I'm a native to Korea. Well, I'm not. I was born in Canada. I spent the first 2 weeks of my life there, being conditioned to sleep the whole night through. I don't know how they did it, but they did it so that when the mother went home, we slept through the night. And I have some theories on it, which might explain things that happened later. But anyway, everybody my age or so was born over the river. You know, it was the American side didn't have a hospital. Everyone was born there. Parents would get the baby. They stay there 2 weeks. Dad would come get them, bring them home, stop at the customs, and they'd say, "Oh, cute baby," or maybe not. And that was it. There were no papers. There's no paperwork or anything. And that was great until we got older, and we want passports, join the military, or anything else. Well, all of a sudden, we're not American citizens. So I'm happy to say I do have papers. I've been naturalized. you know, I was due to go in the service, and the guy called me up. He says, "Can't do it." He says, "You're not an American citizen." And so they rushed a naturalization ceremony, and got that done. And the next day, I joined up. But that was a different story. We're not covering all of that tonight, but I did want to get that out of the way. So even though I've spent, you know, my dad's family is from Korea. They've lived there since 1812, pretty much from the beginning. And we spent a lot of time there. You know, my grandfather was still alive till 77. And so that's where we're going to go to now.
Don't get deported.
Well, I know. I have to be careful because even though I am naturalized, I don't know if that's real. Although Canada never lets anybody go, so they would take me back. So because my sister said to them, they crossed the border up in New York, and she says, "Well, I'm an American citizen now," and he says, "We never let anybody go." So they're always willing to. I don't know about now, but well, we're not going to talk about that. So now we're going to go. It's the winter of 77, 76. So we're fast forwarding. My parents are living up in Bangor area, and they're going to move that next spring. They're going to move to Korea for good, so full time. Well, due to some circumstances, which were, I had no job, no money, and no prospects. I was coming off of a failed marriage, you know, the first marriage, as I say, my first one, and which completely blew my kids away when, I don't know how old they were when they discovered. They said to their mother, they said, "Do you know Dad was married once?" So anyway, I moved back home, and that's always, you know, a sign of something when you move back home. But you know, they took me in, and so I had a place to live. And so that spring, we moved to Korea, and I did have a very rustic cabin down there. It was basically one room, cold running water, an outhouse, and so it was basically like my separate room away from my parents. So I did have some separation. But we moved down there, and I was really at a low point because, you know, like I say, I had no prospects. I had applied for a job at the Bucksport paper mill, and I'm thinking, I will be here no more than 3 months, and then I'm gone. I'm not staying here, and I had no desire to live in Korea. And even though I like Korea, I enjoyed our time there, but it wasn't enough going on with the party scene, I think it was at the time. So I said to my friend Greg Ray, now the Rays lived in the old schoolhouse, which is now Chapter 2. And I said to him, I said, "Greg, I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I said, I got nothing. And he says, "Well, look," he says, I'm clamming. He says, "Come with me, you know, you dig clams. I'm doing pretty good." So I dug a few clams in my life, broken most of them, and I hated doing it, and I didn't eat clams, and so I had nothing else. So I said, okay. So I got geared up. A couple days, we're down on the flats, and we're digging the tide. So tide gets done, we're done, and I dug $11 worth of clams. Now, it was 77, and price was different then, but $11 worth of clams, even then, wasn't very many. And I had trouble carrying them off the flats, and my friend Greg comes over, he says, "Here," he says, "I'll carry that for you." And I says, "No." I says, "Greg, I can do this myself. I can do this myself." And I think that was the beginning of the transformation that I was making at the time. And so I go home, and I says to my mother, I says, "Well, I dug $11 worth of clams today." And she didn't say anything. I says, "But tomorrow, I'm going to dig more." And I detected a little bit of an eye roll, and which I don't blame her. I don't blame her, you know. At this point, you know. But so the next day I go, and I dug more clams, and I went every day, 7 days a week. And every day I did more clams. And I bought a headlamp, and I was doing 2 tides a day. I'd go down middle of the night, dig clams, and middle of the day I'd dig clams. And I did this all summer into the fall, and so into the fall. By then I'm feeling much better. I'm in a much better place mentally, physically, and financially. Clamming was an all-cash business at the time, so we won't talk about that. But although I do think it's been a long enough. But so I made enough that summer to buy a brand new pickup. That's because pickups weren't that expensive back then, but I did buy a brand new Chevy pickup, and so things were going pretty well. And the next spring, my dad, he'd been skiff fishing in a small boat with an outboard motor on it, and he bought a bigger boat, and I took over the skiff, and so I started lobster fishing, and just a few traps, and I was having a good time, and so that went on for most of the summer. I did that, and then in the fall I went on his boat with him to help him take his traps up, and when he got his traps up, I got on another boat that needed some help, and I worked with them for the next couple of years. Some skiff fishing in the summer when he didn't need me, but the rest of the time I was with that other fisherman. So I did learn quite a bit doing that. And pretty soon I bought my own bigger boat, power boat, and before I knew it, I had a bigger boat, a wife, 2 kids, a house, and a mortgage. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. So there's no getting away now. And I remember we were living in my grandparents' house where John and Jennifer are, and when we first got married, and my wife was working at near Gouldsboro Bay, the nursing home in Millbridge, and she liked to go bicycling every day. She was a fanatic. She had to go on her bike. Well, Korea that summer was foggy. It was foggy every day. So she'd come from Millbridge. It was beautiful weather. She'd come to Korea. It's foggy, and she would complain. She says, "I hate this place." She said, "I'm going to bring my bicycle to Millbridge." Well, so I was a little concerned, but she eventually became like me. We wouldn't leave. But so. It's now about 2010, and the census is coming up for the 2010 census. And the Census Bureau always has people working for it full-time, but then they have to hire this huge crew to go out, and I think they're the numerators or something they call us. So now, here's the other thing. My wife talks me into taking the test to work for the census, which I didn't want to do. I had my winters off now. I didn't want to do this work. I lobster fished. I didn't want to do anything else. And so, to make her happy, I went up, I took the test, and when I called the guy, and I'm talking to him about, how I did on the test, he's down in Augusta, and he says, "Well, you did pretty well on the test there." He says, "And I see here that you have data entry experience and you type." Well, so that year they were going to use these handheld computers to track everybody. So everybody that went out to the houses was going to put everything in these little computers, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on these little computers that were going to automatically link up with these giant computers somewhere, and all the information would be put together. Well, so that's why I added that part. And actually, I had created a Facebook page. That was my data entry. I was pretty proud of it. I did it myself. And I had to type. I did about 3 words a minute. I think the kids timed me once. They said, "Well, you got 3 words a minute." Because I had no idea what the letters were. And so my wife says, "You lied. You lied on a government form." She says, what are you going to do if they find out?" I said, "I'm not worried about it. I, didn't expect to be hired." So the guy says to me, he says, "Geez, this looks good." He says, "Where do you want to work? Do you want to work in the office or in the field?" I says, well, all of a sudden, I'm like, wow. I said, "I'll go whatever you need. I'm there. I'll work in the field. I'll work in the office." I'm your guy. And so they put me as a crew leader. I would run a 15-person crew, and the computer thing didn't work. They didn't link up with anything. It was a whole huge, somebody made a lot of money out of it. Whoever sold the computers, because they got paid. But so we didn't have to worry about that. It was all paper. It was all on paper and pencil or whatever. And so it was great too, because I controlled these 15 people who in 2010 there were a lot of people out of work. It was a hard time for the economy, and I had one guy who spoke five languages. I had other people who, they were like professor types and all these, people, very educated people. And I read later that census was probably the most efficient census because so many people were out of work and they applied for these census jobs and they got the jobs, because they probably did well in the tests and they had good resumes. And so these people were just great. And they would go out and do the work and they would bring it back to me. And all I had to do, there was a lot of hours. Pay was great. A lot of hours though. I had one week I had 60 hours, and they told me, they said, if anybody in your crew works more than 40 hours a week, they're fired. So I had to keep track of the hours, and I told them, I said, you can't turn in any more hours than that. So I have to go to like a regional meeting. So I'm there with the other regional people, and there's some uppity ups there from the census, and we're sitting at the table, and he's talking about overtime, and I said to him, well, I worked 60 hours this week. And he's like, oh my gosh, it's like 60 hours. And he's going to light into me, and my supervisor, she speaks right up for me. She says, hey, Joe had to do it because he's over in Blue Hill, and he's got to go all over the place and all this stuff. So the guy says, okay, this time's okay, but don't do it again. Don't do it again. I said, okay. Next week I had 80 hours. I'd come home at night and I'd be down for hours, working at the table with all these, putting everything together, and my wife would be down yelling. She said, I'm not bad, but so, it was a lot of hours. Good, like I said, the overtime was good. So after that crew got done, I got another crew, different area, same thing, and great people. I don't know how many people here know Mary Ann Kennedy. She was our postmaster. Do you remember?
Oh, I didn't know her last name.
Yeah. Well, Mary, she could type like way fast. She could just type like crazy, and she loved it. She wasn't working at the post office then. She just had the best time, and she would always be the first one to come in the morning and to get the best spots, because she wanted to go where all the big houses were and places down the shore you never saw, and she could go down there, and do it legally. And so the census finishes up, and this is all leading somewhere. If you hear some foot tapping, that will be Jennifer telling me to move on. But, and then we will get into the oysters. So it's about 2010, and the Grange puts on this program. It's an artist tour. I don't know if anybody in that time, I don't remember the exact year that was, the first artist tour.
I don't remember either.
Well, anyway, it was around that time. And so what it was all the artists in Korea, there were quite a few, there's quite a few there, and they opened their studios, and some of the heritage artists, the artists that are gone now, their work was shown in the Grange. The Grattan Condon's studio was actually still there, just like he left it. His brushes were there, his paints, his painting, and it was a great tour. Very popular, a lot of people. It was a beautiful day, I remember that. And you got to see all these artists, the things they were doing, and talking to them. And so when it got done, it was such a hit. The Grange says, well, we're going to do it next year. And I says to myself, I'm thinking, my Aunt Louise. I don't know if anybody has seen my aunt's photos in the gallery, and so she was a photographer, and she grew up in Korea, and moved to Boston, and had a studio there with her partner, but she'd taken a lot of photos in the 40s, 50s, 60s of the Gouldsboro Peninsula, Prospect Harbor, Schoodic, Korea. And it wasn't so much people, because back in those days, I don't think the fishermen would have liked a woman taking that picture. It was a little, anyway. So, but there were people in there. My grandfather's featured quite a bit. So, and they're great photos. She turned them all into postcards. And each of us kids has a complete set of these postcards. And she sold them in the library in the post office in Prospect Harbor, and the store in Korea. She sold them in a few places for probably pennies at the time. And so I had all of her negatives. They're all on an odd size negative. And so I went to Ellsworth. There was a guy, and he digitized a bunch of them for me. And so I started, and he showed me how to, I bought the equipment, and I printed them off, and I put them in, I turned my shop into a gallery down on the wall of her life. It was starting, her first photo, probably her first professional photo she took was when she was apprenticing in Bangor. Marsden Hartley, the painter, was living with my grandparents at the time, and he came up to have his photo taken. And he comes into the studio, and Louise had just started with this guy up there. And so he wants his photo taken. Well, the photographer was out of the studio at the time, and the only thing that Louise knew how to do was take a passport photo. And she wanted to make Hartley, she wanted to please him. They didn't get along, so she, they were a lot alike. Hartley and my aunt were a lot alike. Hard to get along with, and especially when it was business. And so to please him, she says, well, okay. She says she stands him up. She takes a picture of him. Now, it must have been winter. He's wearing a coat, and I think a scarf and a hat. And so she takes that photo, and she doesn't know what else to do. He wants something. So she says, well, take your hat off. So he takes his hat off, and she took that. And so he comes back a little while, and she hands him 2 passport photos. Well, he's like, he loses it. He's like, storms out. He's furious. He's furious. My aunt she doesn't know what to think. I mean, she tried to, that's all she could do. Well, it turns out, they're classic photos. But so anyway, it starts with that, and it goes through her time here and in Boston. They worked for a lot of clients there. Tufts College was a big one. So I set it up, and the artist tour came, and people loved it. I got a lot of good feedback from a lot of people, and I said, I should open a gallery. This would, with her photographs, I could print them up, and that way I can make money to pay for the equipment and get more of these, because I got hundreds. I have hundreds still I haven't digitized, but I can start digitizing more of these photos and see what's here. So that's what I did. I turned it into a gallery. Took a lot of work, because we went from a rough fish house. I fixed it up a little bit. And so I got the photos in there, and I wrote to Hall. I was lobster fishing at the time. And I'd come in, and I would open up the shop, and I would sit in a chair, and I'd read a book, waiting for people to come. Very few people back in that time came to Korea, and they really didn't come to Korea to look at photos. And so once in a while someone would stop, and I'd go home in the afternoon. My wife would come back she was working at the hospital, I think, or nursing home in Ellsworth, and she'd come home and she'd say, how was your day? And I'd say, yeah, well, it was a pretty good day, yeah. And I said, she'd say, well, people come, and I said, oh yeah, a couple of people came, and she said, well, did they buy anything? And I said, well, no, they didn't buy anything, but they're going to come back. and they never came back. Nobody ever came back. And so I think she just thought I wasn't being productive. And she's working, I'm sitting reading a book. And I don't think, not to be sexist or cause trouble, but I don't think women like that mix. And so she says, well, she says, you get a hot dog cart and you serve some food and they will come. And so that's what I did. I bought a hot dog cart. My son ran it for the first couple of years. He ran it with his girlfriend. They fought all the time. If nobody was there, which was all the time, they would take the hot dog cart home, and that was it. People would show up, nothing there. So those people aren't coming back. And that went on for 2 years. And finally I said, we can't do this. It's either you were open every day or you're done. So he did. He opened every day. And probably some of you have been to the war. And it just got like crazy busy. After people heard about it, word of mouth. And I think all those signs I put all over them. I had people telling me, we were down near Portland, coming up, and we saw your signs, and I'm like, well, okay, but I wasn't going to argue with them. But, so that drew a lot of people. Those little signs really built the business, I think, and word of mouth. But so that's going on. That's going great. And then, so we got to hear. Oh wow, we're on the second page already. We're gonna get to these oysters in just a minute. Yeah, we got time. So in also 2013, the University of Maine with the Darling Center and a couple other groups, they offered a course, aquaculture course, and if you could, they offered it. They went the whole state, the whole coast, and it was supposed to be to fishermen. Lobster fishermen and clammers maybe, and this was going to be something they could do in the winter, and that they could learn to do this, do it in the winter, and then they could be hauling in the summer. So it didn't work out that way, but they did come and they did a class in Prospect Harbor. We did a class there at the town office, and it was once a week for most of the winter, I think. And it taught a lot of aspects of aquaculture, but it was more like just getting your feet wet with it. You didn't get right down in the weeds with it, and because we didn't know, most of the guys that were doing it, I talked to a dozen people, and I needed a dozen people to do this course, so they'd come, and I talked a dozen people into doing it, and I'm sure they all said to themselves, "Why am I here?" Because none of them ever did anything with it. And there was actually another class. They only got 2 classes on the whole coast. And another was down near Brunswick. And nobody from that class ever did anything. I was the only one out of the first 2 classes there that actually went ahead and did something. So behind my house, I don't know, you can't see this anymore, and it's kind of hard to get to, but this is, I got a laser here. Okay, so where's the Bunyan Road?
It's not on the map.
No, it's not on the map. The Bunyan Road is like right along here, because I live up here.
We're on the sands right now.
What?
You're
No.
hovering over the sands.
Where am I? Where am I?
Head east. Go east, Joe.
Far south.
East.
Oh, wait a minute.
East.
Come towards Korea.
Oh, there's the
Right,
sands.
That's the
That's
sands.
the sands.
Oh, okay.
That's Paul Bunyan.
Okay, Paul Bunyan Road's in here. So Paul Bunyan Road runs in here and way up here and way, it goes everywhere. So behind my house, which is somewhere about right there, is a salt pond, which somebody has put a red dot on.
So you can find it.
Oh. Yeah. Well, that's true. Everything looks different, especially in the fog. I had cold. So, anyway, so it's about a 35 acre or so salt pond. It's used to be a mill there that ran by, it's a reversing falls, and it's just a neat area. And I always thought, there's got to be something that could be done there, but I didn't know what. But after I took this course, I said, oh, I know, I'll raise oysters there. It looks perfect. So 2014, I applied to the state, and to get any sort of permission to do anything on the ocean is a lot of paperwork. So I went for a very small 400 square foot lease, LPAs they call it, limited purpose leases. And they were easy to get at the time. And so I get this, I got 400 square feet. I baited it like 20 by 20. And I went out and I bought some gear, like bags like these. And that summer, I had some oysters delivered, oyster spat. Now the oyster spat, we'll look at them a little later. They're really small and 10 millimeters. And so I only got a handful, a couple thousand. And because this was a hobby. This was just a hobby. I was lobster fishing, I had the restaurant going. I was kind of stretched, but I wanted a hobby. And so, which actually everything I've ever done has been a hobby. I never planned on lobster fishing. Of course, the clamming that really wasn't a hobby. But and I never wanted a restaurant. The restaurant, all I wanted was the gallery and the hot dog cart to get some people there, and it morphed into that. So I tell people I started an accidental restaurant. But this was just going to be a little project, and so the first year, I killed most of the oysters. There's a lot of things you don't learn in the class that happen in the wild. The green crabs that can be microscopic or they can be big, and they are able to get into all but the bigger oysters. I have an oyster here. This is, of course, I brought this along. That's a pretty big oyster, and that might have died of old age. I don't know how long. I don't know how long they live. I mean, they might live anywhere from 5 to 15 years or so. But so I don't know what killed that one. But they wouldn't get into something like that probably. But the smaller ones, an inch or so, half an inch, and especially the little ones that are smaller than your fingernail. I mean, that's just a little tasty treat for them. It's like M&Ms, I think. And they just, they just go through them. And if they get in these bags, then, you got to be vigilant. So the first year I killed a lot of them, but I ended up with some. And the next year, I got the same amount of oysters. I did a little better, maybe, but still I lost a lot of oysters. And the next year, now the first years, they're getting bigger, but they're growing slow. And I'm a little disappointed. But they're growing slow, but they're coming. And then we get to the story Jennifer tells you when I bring some up, and I have no clue now what to do with them. I had never seen an oyster, let alone taste an oyster, or even see what's inside of a shell before I started this project. And because it wasn't about eating oysters, it was about just like gardening. And so I like to garden. So that's how I looked at it. And so I bring them to Jennifer, and she showed me an opening. So now I go down to the wharf, and I didn't realize people ate oysters really that much. John and Jennifer had talked about the oysters, and so I knew some people ate them, but I didn't think it was that big a deal. And so I go down to the wharf, and I have some oysters, not very many, and it's in the fall, and I offer them to people. I go around the tables different days, and I offer them to people. I said, "Do you want to try these oysters?" And most people said no, but some people tried them, and they were always the best oysters that they ever ate, which is what Jennifer said when she ate the oyster. And now I'm thinking, the oyster you eat today is the best oyster you've ever had. So I don't know if that's true or not, but so they're all like, yeah, these are really good. And I'm not a business person, never said I was. And I just sort of stumbled along. I don't know, a good buddy of mine, he was the guy I was supposed to work at the mill with. He got the job at the paper mill, but he used to say, he says, you know, you're the only guy I know who could stumble face first into a mud puddle and come out of it with a $20 bill. So, you know, and it was never my goal. And so I get this light bulb moment. It was actually, I got a light bulb in my head. I said, I could sell these. I could make money with these oysters. And so I go home and I start thinking about it. But now I've only got a few oysters. They take 3 or 4 years to get to market size. I'm way behind. I want oysters now. Well, so I started buying more equipment and more bags. I started buying hundreds of these bags and these special big condo things to put the bags in and these hanging things and so I'm ramping up and I go, well, okay, so if I'm going to sell oysters, I gotta order more than a couple thousand oysters, you know, because I'm only have a few living every year. So I ordered 100,000 oysters first year that I start this, and they come, and you'll see them here, 2 big bags of oysters, and I mean, you can get a lot of little oysters in your hand, and you put them in these bags, and you leave them in these bags. These would be like for the little tiny oysters, and you put, say, 5,000 oysters in there in a few weeks. You've got half that. You've got to take half of those oysters out because they've gotten bigger, and you've got to take half of them and put them in another bag this size. So you need a lot of bags, and so
Show us the bag, Joe.
the bag.
Hold
Oh,
it up.
this bag here.
Wow.
Okay, so you can look at them afterwards. And, you know, they're sealed at the bottom. They've got a strap here that holds it tight. They're just folded over at the top. And so every 5 or 6 weeks, you're doubling your bags. So pretty soon, you've got this huge amount of bags. So that went pretty well that year. And I actually did better because now I've learned something about keeping them alive. Well, now I'm not thinking, as my dad said once, and I said to him, I'm a teenage boy, and he says, I says, well, I had done something stupid, and as teenage boys do, and he says, I says, well, I didn't think. He says, that's your problem, you don't think. And I says, what? I didn't think. He says, that's your, I said that like 4 times before I finally came up with something else. Well, anyway, so now the next year I order another 100,000. And so we go through the same thing. I have to buy more equipment, more stuff, and it's taking more time. And this hobby of mine, I'm doing by myself because I want to do it on my time, and it's just, you know, just a fun thing. Well, about this time, I'm lobster fishing. The restaurant is going gangbusters. And this oyster farm, if I'm going to run this oyster farm or do anything with it, I don't have time. The restaurant's taking, you know, probably 50 hours a week. And so I said, something's got to go. So that's when I stopped fishing. It was about 2017. And I got done fishing, and I says, okay, so I'll concentrate on the wharf. And I was lucky. I had Wendy Hooper was my manager. She knew the kids. She got all these great high school kids to come, and they stayed for years. So we were very fortunate with that part of it. And she taught them everything. I mean, I'd see these, and it was mostly girls. There was only one boy worked for us, but it was mostly girls. And I would see them when they first came. You know, and they were probably 15. I think some could have been 14, and very, very quiet, very shy. And I remember telling my wife once, I said, well, you know, there's a new worker, and she's like really quiet, but you know, I think she'll be able to run the register. She'll be able to do that. Within a week, she's cooking, she's doing the register, she's doing all this prep work, and that's the way Wendy was with all these kids, and I'm like blown away. I worked there one day, and I burnt everything I could. I would deliver it to the table. My wife would go. Nobody showed up that day. It was supposed to rain, but my wife says we're going to open. It was just the two of us, and I'm cooking, and if I two things on there, and I burned the sandwiches, and she says you can't serve that. And I said, well, we got to, So I'd take it to them, I'd show them. They said, oh no, that's okay. People were really nice about it, And it was just the one day. But I did a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of other stuff to it than all that part. But
They never came back, right?
I don't know if they did. I had a lot of people. I'd say the first couple of years, I'd say, as they're leaving, I would say, tell your friends. And they would say to me, someone would say to me, oh no, we're not going to tell anybody. We love this place. We don't want crowds here. I said, well, that kind of defeats that purpose. So I'm doing that, and the oyster farm is ramping up. We're ramping up. So then another year goes by, and the first huge bunch of oysters are getting bigger, and we're getting more and more bags. I don't know if anybody here has ever read the story, Pigs is Pigs. Huh? Did I hear somebody say yes? Okay. Funny as heck. And that's what it was like. I just kept getting more and more and more. If you ever see this book, Pigs is Big, this is a funny story. It's an old story, but it's funny. So the third year, I order 100,000 oysters. Not thinking. And so they come, and then they're just starting so that I've got enough now to bring to the wharf this next year. And so I might have gotten, 2 years out of that. And so now the oysters are growing, and it's taken about 4 years. And I don't think the fact that it takes so long is a problem if you've got a lot of oysters in the pipeline each year. Then it doesn't matter. And it's actually maybe a good thing. But, so I'm serving them at the wharf, and that's probably taking care of what oysters I've got. That's pretty much what's coming available. And then the pandemic hit, and we shut down. And my wife and I are talking, and we're like, we're only going to do this another maybe 2 years. So we ended up, Wendy bought the wharf, and I said, I'm going to retire again, and I'll just do the oysters. And then I bought more oysters. And so it just got so crazy, and I ran out of bags. I didn't have any place to put them. So I says, well, I got to do something. So I threw them on the bottom of the mill pond. Now, a lot of the mill pond is mud. Only part of it is a gravel bottom. The mill pond's a tricky place. It was, if you dig down a couple feet, a foot or so, the mill pond used to be a lot smaller. If you've ever seen the mill pond, it used to be a lot smaller when my dad was a kid. But now it's eroding, and it's much bigger. And if you dig down a foot or so, you hit sawdust from when it was a mill. They sawed logs, and so you get the sawdust. And you can stand there, and you can bounce like that, and the ground around you is going up and down underwater. The mill pond at low tide, I can walk around. It's a lot of it's not even knee deep, which makes it great for harvesting oysters that are just on the bottom. And so there are places you have to be careful because there's no bottom to it. So I always wear a life jacket, and I usually go around with my punt, just in case. So now I got them on the bottom, I got bags full, and then the pandemic sort of subsides, or I don't know if it subsided, but we're just used to it. Probably there are people in here that have had COVID within the last year. I don't know, you don't have to tell me who you are. But, so, now my focus is the oysters. That's what I'm doing. And as I said, it's a lot of paperwork. Every day I have to go, I go and I harvest oysters. I'm a harvester. I can grow the oysters, but then I have to buy a special license to harvest them. So I have to get the special license so I can go in the water and get my own oysters. And I bring this tag, I fill this tag out, say I get 100 oysters, I fill it out and with the time, all that stuff. And I bring it up to my house and I sell it to this person here, Schoodic Sea Farm, who's a dealer. This is a harvester, this is a dealer. Well, I'm Schoodic Sea Farm, so I sell these to myself. And so now I have to fill this out as I am Schoodic Sea Farm, and I'm buying it from this Joe Young. Because this guy's not Joe Young, this is Schoodic Sea Farm. And then you have to do all these logs. All these logs have to be filled out. There's temperature has to be taken in the refrigerators. I have 2 refrigerators. Twice a day, you have to take the temperature of the fridge, which I was fortunate enough to find some loggers you can put in your fridge, and it goes to the internet, and you can just log on, and I push this button, and I can print the day, I can print the week, or the month. So I print the day, and it gives the times, or well, actually I do it every week. And so you've got the whole readout of the temperature, and then after you do that for both fridges, there's another one where this is like your sanitation report, all the stuff that you've done, and you got to do all this stuff. And because it's important, because oysters, I don't know if anybody here's ever gotten sick eating oysters, but they say it's not fun. And Maine waters are getting warmer, so there's more vigilance going on to keep people healthy. So now we're gonna. Here's the milk pond. I'm gonna go back to here. This is what I harvest them with a lot. It's got a handle. It's almost like a modified blueberry rake, but not quite. It's got these tines on it. And there's a basket. So you drag it, and the oysters go into the basket, and you pick it up. And then when I'm walking around, I usually have like some kind of a basket that's floating, and I just dump the oysters into it. And like I said, there's the mill pond. Has anybody here ever been to the mill pond? I figured you would probably. I think I have photos of you at the mill pond. So, yeah, it's not so easy to get to the mill pond. You used to be able to see the mill pond when you're coming into Corea, past the Bunyan Road toward the village, where that abandoned house is. You used to be able to look right down into the mill pond. It's amazing the amount of growth that's happened in 70 years. So, anyway, here's 2 sacks of oysters. There's 100,000, 50,000 to a bag. And when the FedEx guy, they'd be delivered overnight. And the FedEx guy would come and he'd have these big boxes. And he knew what was in them. He says, these are your babies, right? And he was so excited, every year he'd come with these oysters, and I'm suppose he's delivered them other places too. And so he knows what's in them. He knows where they're coming from these hatcheries. And there's only a few hatcheries in Maine that are authorized to sell these. So these are the babies right here. They're pretty small. Handful like that. When you put them down, you got a lot of them are stuck to your hands. So I have a scoop. I don't know if the scoop's going to be shown, but it's a big, like an ice scoop, but it's a big one. I sent away for a scoop, so I could scoop these things up. And I found one. I found all kinds of them. And I found one, and it was really cheap. I said, well, I'll get that one. Well, it's about this big. That's what a handle. It's like, so I have one that's like 85 ounces or something. I don't know, it holds a lot. But this is a picture. This is the mill pond. My punt is there on a haul off. These right here, I got this. These are a hanging bags, which I didn't invent this, but I thought it up myself. But I think other people thought it up before I did. But I got a piece of rebar, which, for people that don't know, is a piece of steel that they put into concrete. And the ones I get are 20 feet long. They fit inside of these plastic pipes. So it's 20 feet long. There's 3 posts in the mud. I drive in the mud, and then I put another post on them, a short post that's got a hole in it. And the rebar will go through all 3 holes. And each rebar that's 20 feet long will hold 3 of these bags. So this bag, which is kind of neat because I don't have to tend these very much. So the tide will come in, and these are hanging like they are up here. You see the bags are hanging down off the rebar. Tide comes in, lifts this up. So if you go there when the tide's coming up, you'll look in the water and you see all the bags are up like that.
Is that foam on the other?
Yeah, that's full.
So that's why it's floating. Okay.
Yeah. So I thought you were going to complain about the plastic.
Well, that was nice.
They are working on a mushroom-based thing, but I'm not. So then when the tide goes, it comes back down like that. And so twice a day, it's making a complete circle. So that's pretty good. One of the things about oysters is the shell, when they're growing, unless you're doing something, the bottom part of the shell is going to overgrow the other part. Okay, so one shell is going to overgrow the other. So you've got all this like material out here. Well, that's not doing anybody any good because, you know, there's no oyster here. The oyster's in here. So this is just wasted energy. So what this does, if this tumbles all those oysters a couple times a day, and it chips away at that. And so by doing that, it makes you get a better shell on them. It's a deeper cup, and I think it gives them a thicker shell too. So anyway, I came up with that. I thought it was pretty clever, but and that's one of the things. I'm down here by myself. Nobody is instructing me on how to do all this stuff. That's one of the problems I have. So, but anyway, I got that, and then I've got another. I actually have 4 of these small LPAs, limited, these 200 square foot, 400 square foot things. There's one there, and there's another one somewhere there. It might be over here. And so where these are right here, the mud's very soft. So I mean, you're up there, and the mud is up over your ankles, and you don't want to stand in one spot for too long. But so this was a pretty good deal here. Now, this isn't a great photo, but it's like a wire cage, and it's called an oyster condo, and it will fit 6 or 8 of these bags will go in these trays. These bags are in trays, and you slide them in, and once a week you've got to take them out. You got to take them haul them out of there, and you have to flip them over, and then I take them and I go like this with them, like that, and I do that about 8 times. They're a lot heavier than this, and because the oysters are in there growing, and that chips the shells also. That keeps the shells chipped out. And otherwise you get oysters that are kind of an odd shape type of thing. Here's a small barge boat I've got that in the fall, there's my scooper right there. So in the fall, because I have so many oysters coming, I don't have enough room, I don't have enough bags to keep splitting these in half and putting them in other bags. So now I said, you know what? They just got to go on the bottom and fend for themselves with the green crabs, which the bigger oysters seem to be doing real well with that. So here I've dumped a lot of oysters in here, and I'm going to go and spread them on the bottom. I take the scoop and I just fling them around and say, I hope I see you the next year. And these are about market size here. Now there's a green crab. Wow. They can get big, and they're very hardy. They bite really hard. Yeah. So I decided I would catch green crabs. I said, I'm going to start catching these green crabs. And so I put a trap out. It was a fairly big 2 feet by 4 feet by, I think it was 15 inches high. And it had a thing on the top, and so I go to haul it, and first day, I haul it up. I can barely get it in the boat. There were 2 bushel of green crabs. 2 bushel of green crabs in this trap. I don't use that trap anymore, it's too heavy. So then I had to do something with them. These things don't die easily. So I put them in fish totes. They're a plastic container, like what's the word?
Tray.
Tray.
Big deep tray.
It's a deep tray. And it will hold about 3 buckets of bait or green crabs. Do I have any more time?
Yes, you do.
I was told at 8:05 everybody's going to be putting the chairs away. So, okay, so anyway,
Can't fix the clock.
I dump them in this thing, and I put the covers on, and now I got, because I had more than one trap, so now I got a bunch of out on my float. It's hot sun, beating on these things. About 4 days later, I go back. I says, well, you know, I'm going to have a lot of dead crabs. It's going to be smelly, but anyway, I popped the cover off the first tray. Green crabs are like boiling out of this thing. And I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? I don't have enough trays to keep hauling for more crabs and piling them up here. So, I don't know if anybody's ever seen that Lucy show where she and Ethel are in Italy and they're stomping the grapes. So I put them in a big thing and I start stomping. And I gotta tell you, that takes a lot of energy. And I said, I can't do this. So I'm talking to John Ward, who owns the property on the other side of the mill pond from me. And we're talking, and he says, I got just the thing for you. He says, somebody gave this to me. I don't use it, but I'll bring it down to you. So he brings down it's an old wood chipper.
Oh, good.
And it doesn't shoot out the chute, it shoots straight down. So now, I set it up on a stand, and I bring a tote of these green crabs, and I dump them into the chute. And they race down in there because they're getting away. I mean, you could let green crabs go out in the yard here, and they would find their way back. They would go down the guzzle, and they would be back in the ocean within a couple of days. And well, anyway, they run down there. They come out. It looks like puree. It's beautiful. It's mostly liquid, but it's beautiful stuff. I says, you could cook with this. You know, you could make something. And I ended up. I took lobster shells from the wharf. I put those in there. Those are dry. And then I put some kelp, which added some thickener, because kelp's a thickener. And it made a really nice lobster bait. And I couldn't keep my mouth shut about it. And I was telling a warden about it, and he said, you can't do that. I said, why not? Well, you might be using short lobsters. I says, well, I get lobsters from the wharf. I get their shells. Oh, no, it's not legal. And so I went up just below the head warden. I worked my way up, and I said, I just don't understand it. He says, well, that's what it is. He says, you have to be authorized. I says, well, the wardens come and check our lobsters at the wharf. You know, that's one of their jobs. And we've never had a problem. Well, I didn't have time to pursue it, so I lost interest. So anyway, green crabs, if you ever wanted a pet, I don't know how long they'd live. Probably but they are a miserable, invasive species. They really are. The clams don't stand a chance against these. Mussels, they can eat mussels. It's a mess. I'm sure some, blue crabs actually. Blue crabs, they're starting to catch blue crabs down in southern Maine. I haven't heard of any up this way yet. It's probably just a matter of time when a population gets established. I've heard blue crabs eat green crabs. So, yeah, the blue on the green. So here's some more hanging bags. well, they're the same ones, but yeah. And oh, there's me. I try to keep a hat that's going to cover my ears, and this was the only hat I had at the time. It really doesn't cover my nose, and so I have bigger hats now. Last fall I had to do basically a chemical peel. I don't know, probably some of you have had that, where you put this chemo cream on your face they make you do it for a long time, much longer than you want to. It's not pleasant, and everything flakes off, and it's pretty scary. So this is me out in the water. As you can see, it's not that deep. This rope here is attached to a basket here that's floating that I put the oysters in. And I sort of just drag it around, it's like slave to me, come on. There's my punt there. Here's a tumbler. So the oysters go here, and I push them down into here. This turns, and this is a water hose that comes up from the mill pond, and this is the water line runs here. I got it right here. Whoops! Wait a minute. Hang on. Yeah. So that's a water line that runs the length of it. So this thing turns, and so as it's turning, all these oysters are just tumbling on top of each other, and it's chipping the shells. And they come out at the end, and then they're tumbled, they're cleaned, and ready for sale. I also try to do this at least once a year to all my oysters, just to keep them on a good track. And there's a basket of oysters. The oysters that are sitting on the bottom of the mill pond turn green. The ones in the bags, in the condos, and the hanging bags, they don't turn green. A lot of people like the green. You can't really scratch it off, but if you put them in the fridge, the green will disappear after a day or so, unless you cover it with a wet cloth. So I told that to a place I sold some oysters to, and I said, yeah, that's the only way to do it. And I went over one day, and I walked in, and I was looking to see how many they sold. They still have the cloth over it, no sign. They didn't sell any. So I said, you might have to take that on. But anyway, this was a random. Anybody that went through the storms from the winter before, this was down at my lease site. I had left my lease site immaculate. Everything was lined up, and everything was in good shape. And I come back, and the water had gone way up on the land. I mean, this had never happened before. And it had taken everything, bags and traps and condos, and it was just a big mishmash of debris from the ocean and rockweed and a horrible mess. And it took I've got a pontoon boat, it's 20 by 10, and I use that as a barge, which now sits on the land. It's a good land barge, and thankfully I tied it. I tied both ends of it. Well, it broke, it lifted it up, it broke the front line and swung it up onto the land. So I was fortunate that it didn't sustain any damage. A side thing I do is kelp. This is kelp. I don't know if anybody here eats kelp on a daily basis or regular. If you're making a stew or beans or something and you want to thicken it, you put a piece of sugar kelp in there, and that'll take that stew and thicken it right up. Same with beans; it will thicken the beans up. And not to mention that kelp. I probably don't know how to say the word right. Chelet, Chelete. Chelet. Oh, chelet. That makes sense. Okay, so it cleanses your body. It takes the toxins out of your body. It attaches to them, takes them out of your body, and so it's good for that. Mostly Asian countries, the cultures, they're the ones that seem to be eating a lot of the kelp. It's some in this country, but and more people are actually eating kelp than they don't realize it. Kelp is becoming put in a lot of places. But I made this to dry this kelp. But here's the problem here: is this takes time, and I don't have time to harvest kelp anymore. So that's my logo, and end of slideshow. Click to exit. That's it. Really good audience. Yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Where do we get your oysters?
Well, I never got to that part, did I?
It's a hobby.
I live on the Paul Bunyan Road. Do you know where that is? Okay, I'm the first house on the right. It's about a quarter of a mile. So not the other side, on the right. I'll tell that to people, and I'll be waiting for them, and they'll drive by. Down the Bunyan Road they go, and they come back, and they say, well, we saw you there, but we didn't know. So I have a self-serve stand. So I have this little shed with a refrigerator, and I have bags of oysters, a box of money. You can pay, well, I started out, it was cash, and then I got Venmo. I'd never heard of Venmo, but these young people came, they had no money, and they said, you don't have Venmo? I said, I didn't know what it was. I said to my son, I said, he was home at the time, I said, what's Venmo? He says, oh, did you push some buttons? And I had Venmo. But, so I have Venmo now, check, and then, so I had all this up here, check, Venmo, and by money order, I suppose, but in cash. And I opened my cash box up. There's some of it I lock up. The money people pay me goes into a little slot. And so I open it up and I pull out this paper. I owe you. So, and I occasionally get IOUs, and I've always been paid. It's so and so. They'll say, we're from blah blah blah. We wanted. So now on my side, you can pay an IOU. So, and I do sell inexpensive oyster knives. Okay, so they're very inexpensive. These aren't oyster knives you're going to have for ever, because they're very inexpensive, but they do work. So a lot of people who are here on vacation, I find a lot of people from the outer states come here. They eat oysters. They want to eat oysters, and they didn't bring a knife because they didn't know they would run into oysters. So I sell them these knives, and I buy them. This winter I stocked up on them. I said I might not be able to get them, so I bought a whole bunch. And so they're more of an emergency knife. I might sometime do a oyster tasting thing down on my lease on the land. Not right away though. So.
Are you doing the farmer's market this year?
And I do the farmer's market in. Thank you, John. Yes, I want to see John and Jennifer there. I do the farmer's market on Tuesdays in Winter Harbor by the restaurant there on the corner, and the parking lot was for sale where everyone parks, but I see Phil's taking that off the market. So we're still there, and that'll be going on. And like I say, I have that. I didn't think I could have brought. I could have brought cards, or I have brochures, which you can pick up at the Oyster Shed, and that'll be open in another week or so, maybe next week. We might open it, or you can call me and get an order if I'm harvesting. Yeah.
Are oysters affected by red tide?
Yes. So that's another thing you have to do. Every morning I have to check the DMR website for shellfish toxin or whatever, biotoxins and all that. And they have maps and charts, and and each area that people are doing aquaculture has different. My letters are EJ. This swath of coast that I'm on, and so they if there's an area closed, if there's red tide or biotoxin or whatever. So that's where I find out about it. And then I can also call them too if there's a question. But yeah. Yes, Sal.
The bags, are they small enough to keep those very smallest green crabs from getting in?
Well,
The
yeah,
mesh?
so that's another problem that, okay, green crabs start out as microscopic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they can get in here. So that's the reason why these ones have to be dumped out every month or so, and you have to go through them.
And you have to call out the crab?
Yeah,
Oh, man.
yeah. And of course, they're just little crabs.
Yeah.
Unless you've been there a long time. And then you
And
got
they
a lot of...
start eating your
Yeah,
products,
yeah.
right?
Then you have one dead oysters and then bigger green crabs. But so it's it's a whole process. It's
Do
a
you have
hobby.
those bags in the middle of the pond or near the outflow?
They're near the outs. They're near the shore, not near the channel,
Oh, okay.
not near the falls.
Yeah.
There's too much current there.
Yeah, right.
The first year I sunk oysters, I had one of those condos, and I filled 6 bags with oysters. I mean, and they were heavy. And I had 6 bags in there. And I took them, and right where the water comes into the mill pond, there's a channel. And it's, you know, when you've got a channel like that, and the tide's coming up, it's like, you know, the tide is coming in is here, the tide in the mill pond's down here. I mean, it's just a force coming in, as you know, and so I took these condos and I dumped them in this, and it makes a bowl right there, there's a deep hole, and so I dumped them in there. I go down a couple of days later, and winter's coming. Okay, so it's pretty close, and cold weather is supposed to be like that night, and I look down the mill pond. It's tide's out, and here is this thing that must have weighed 250 pounds. It's way down in the mill pond, over toward the other shore. So this tide is so strong, so that didn't work out. I take them now about halfway over toward John's property,
Okay.
and not too far off the bar. There's kind of a deep spot. It's not real deep. But so far, that's been a good spot, and I don't use the condos anymore for that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
What is the water temperature range that you need to?
It's got to be above 50.
About 50.
It's got to be above 50.
Above 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got to be above 50, and after that, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
No.
Okay.
Well, I say it doesn't matter. I don't know. The mill pond in the summer, when the tide's going all day and the sun's out, it can get 80 plus degrees.
Can it really?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were kids, and my dad and my kids, and even my sister's kids now, but we all swam down there. Yeah, you probably swam in there. Yeah. So, of course, you're older, so you were probably swimming in colder water. But you were younger too. I mean,
Glaciers, right?
yeah, yeah. I used to swim. I think when I was a kid, I swam some in the ocean, but it's really cold. And this time of year, when I'm working in the water, because I have a wetsuit at 7 millimeter, and I have the gloves and the boots and everything, and that's not too bad. But one time I was out there just kind of wandering around once, trying to get in the lay of the land, and I had just some hip boots on, and I went over my boots, and it was in the spring, and the water was so cold, I barely made it to the shore, and I had a 4-wheeler right close by, pointed toward the house, and I said, you know, no way I could have walked home. I mean, after a while it did warm up, but that water is cold. You don't last long when water's like that. But yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
Where are the free samples?
I didn't know anybody would want oysters. I guess you would have to wait for me to do a tasting thing or something.
We could do it at the
But
restaurant.
seriously, I love oysters and I have no clue how to open them.
Well, see, that's it too. So, and I should do, oysters aren't hard to open, and that's the problem with a lot of people, that they don't know how to open the oysters. You can get oysters, you could put them on your grill, your gas grill, just for a very short time. You're not cooking them, you heat them a little bit, and they will open. You can do the same thing in the oven. I do that when I've deep fried oysters. If anyone's had deep fried oysters, if you like clams, fried clams, deep fried oysters are way better. They are delicious. So, yeah.
I was curious, so the oysters winter over in Mill Pond?
They do. I put them in a deeper spot. Now I use lobster traps, and I put them in these bags. I fill, I don't fill them right full, but I can put like 4 of these bags into one of these lobster traps that I've cut the heads and the bridge out, and they'll fit down in there, and then I seal the door, fasten the door shut. And there's a place in the mill pond that's a little deeper, the current's not bad, and I can put them in there. And then, so right now I've got 24 traps sitting there with each one has four bags in it, and they'll probably work out to about 3 times that number, so it's 24 times 4 times probably 3, something like that. Be a lot of bags.
And you've got to clean out crabs all winter from those bags?
I don't touch them all winter.
No.
They're on their own all winter. I'm in Florida, so they're just hanging out. The green crabs they hibernate when the temperature gets down probably below 50 or so. Now, really cold weather. It'll be interesting this year because you had a real winter here this year, and it'll be interesting to see if the green crabs got killed off or anything, or if you even noticed. It doesn't seem to have affected the ticks. I know probably some of you have seen ticks. Have you seen ticks? Yeah. We've got a dachshund. His legs are about this long, so long hair. So, and we sit on a double recliner. He's right between us. So, it's just a matter of time. But they all seem to go up onto his head, which is good because, my wife can see things really close and she sees them. So, but I have had Lyme disease. I'm sure some of you have too. But anything else?
How many months? When is harvesting time?
I can start now.
Can you really? I thought you were talking about the fall earlier. That's the best time. But you can do it all season long.
People like them in the fall. They start fattening up for winter.
Okay.
Although I don't know if there's a big difference.
Yeah.
I've had them. I'm beating them now, and they're good. So, and you just had some, and they were good. So
your whole season.
Every month of the best oysters ever eaten.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Now down south, they say you don't eat oysters with it's got to have an R in the word.
That has more to do. The tradition of that. I finally found out what that was about. Was before commercial wide-scale refrigeration.
Okay.
You didn't eat shellfish in a month that didn't have
Okay.
an R in it because it was too warm.
That's
and it would
because
spoil.
because when I harvest the oysters, I bring them ashore, I bring them to my barge. It's right there, and I have coolers full of ice, and I put the oysters in the same bags, the onion bags that. So I'll put 100 oysters in an onion bag, and so I'll have a few of those bags. And then I've got an ice machine, so I've got coolers full of ice. I'll dump water in them, and I'll put them in an ice bath. And that cools them down real quick. There's rules on how long I have as a harvester, to cool these off. And then, of course, there's other rules where I have, as a dealer, that I have done. And actually, when you add up all these hours that you have, I don't think I would eat an oyster that had been out in a warm day that long. Because these oysters are almost immediately cooled down below 50 degrees. They're down below 40. And then I take them, and from there, and I put them in a refrigerator. So 2 minutes from my house, so it's quick. So I will say, oysters will live. You could put a batch of oysters in your refrigerator, and they would live in there for weeks. Theoretically, you could put them in a cooler, and some people do that. They'll if they don't have a winter over place, they'll put them in coolers, in totes, and they'll live all winter.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not gonna be fresh. So, and there's no, when you see oysters different places, there's no sell-by date on an oyster. As long as that oyster is on ice or refrigerated, it's fine. It's not going to make you sick. But I've been spoiled. These are the only oysters I eat. I only eat my oysters, and because I know when they are harvested and I know how I treat them. So that's a big thing for me. If I went somewhere else, unless I knew the farmer and knew the chain, I'm not going to eat any oysters. But that's what I tell people from the city. They go, yeah, we go this buck a shuck thing, and it's like, well, and you're drinking beer, so it probably tastes fine. So yeah, I don't know. I mean. And a lot of people don't even taste oysters. I've never put anything on the oysters. Well, I say never. I think I tried some stuff once at the wharf. One time just for fun, we put them on a grill, opened them, and I think Wendy made up some stuff, and we stuffed them, and we ate those. And I said, well, this is good, but you don't even need the oyster. I mean, I would have people come to the wharf and they'd say, do you have any of that hot sauce? That hot sauce they use down south. And I say, no. And if I did, I wouldn't sell it to you. I says, you're not putting that on these oysters. So, and I will tell people, I'll say, look, I know you got to put the cocktail sauce on or whatever, but try one oyster without anything. These are fresh enough that, you take that oyster in, and like Jennifer told me, you get that initial briny taste, and then you bite, and it just releases the sweetness. And I'm sure there's a word for it, but it's really good.
Perfect oyster taste.
Yeah.
There it is.
And so I tell people that, and people will say, yeah, that is good. But I mean, people are so conditioned to, especially people down south. I mean, people will tell you how good those crayfish are. Well, I've never eaten a crayfish, and bless you, I probably wouldn't, but they cook it in like old spice and all that stuff, and it's like, and that's the only way they're good. I know. Well, anyway, that's how I eat my oysters. You can have them any way you want. So anyway, any more questions? Because I know everybody wants to go home, and I mean, it's 8:30. All right.